I'm gonna give you a secret. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone. Today is a big one. We're gonna be talking about how to grow that booty. Obviously, I have done a lot on my Instagram about my glute growth, and there are specific things that I'm going to address in this video, especially when it comes to programming of lower body workouts, which I'm feeling I can use my knowledge in personal training and online coaching to help you guys. Right, so those that follow me will know that I came from a place where I was quite underweight, so obviously food had a big role to play. But firstly, with glute growth, there are several key things that I would say are really important. Number one is making sure you're eating enough. These are all things I will go into, but make sure you're eating enough, the programming of your workouts, rest and recovery, and things such as overtraining, cardio, and what to do with all of that sort of stuff there. Programming. I'm gonna give you a secret. Programming lower body workouts. Now, to get glute growth, obviously you've got quads, hamstrings, glutes, but to get glute growth and to get the best results is glute focused workout should have a hinge movement. Now that can be RDLs, deadlifts, anything where you are basically hinging down at the hips. A lunge movement, now that can be reverse lunges, elevated lunges, alternating lunges, forward lunges, that movement where you are springing off your foot to come back and making sure that you're really driving from the glute there is super, super key. So a hinge movement, a lunge movement, a thrust movement. This is where I specialize. Like, there are so many variations that you can do for a thrust movement. Now that is for hip thrust, you have your conventional hip thrust. And one thing I would really say when it comes to thrust movements in particular is making sure you are not ego lifting, because you still really want to feel that mind muscle connection. Now, I know I am one, I love to go heavy on my hip thrust, and that is more for strength more than actual glute growth. I will have some strength sessions where I really go strength on the hip thrust, but ideally you want to feel that mind muscle connection. So going into variations, so as I said, you have your conventional hip thrust, the B stance hip thrust, and that is where you are still getting some support, but your working leg is taking the majority of the weight. But because you have that extra little bit of support, it's not like a single leg hip thrust. You can actually go that bit heavier because you have that stability there. Triple contraction hip thrust is another one where you can really get that mind to muscle connection. So that is another variation of hip thrust that I do love to throw in there for my clients. And then this one is so good for glute growth is the CAS glute bridge. And why it's so good is because it's like a hip thrust, yet you don't do the full range of motion of the hip thrust, because there comes a point in the hip thrust where your quads begin to take over. So with the CAS, you almost just stay in that upper third, and that means the contraction is solely coming from the glutes and hamstrings there. There are also other variations. I'll have like a hip thrust, like barbells type hip thrust in one of my leg workouts of the day, and then another one I'll just use like a dumbbell, anything where you're thrusting essentially. And then we have the squats. So the squat is the final, like, fourth movement that I would say is really important in a lower body program for glute growth. I'll have back squat in one, then maybe a goblet squat sweep set in another, or a leg press, glute focused leg press. That also counts as a squat, and that is where you have your feet nice and high and narrow there. So a leg press is actually a squat movement that you can include there as well. And when it comes to squats as well, change it up. You can have a pause at the bottom, you can do a high bar squat, you can low bar squat, just as long as you have that squatting movement in your lower body workout, then you're good to go. So yeah, I use those main four movements as like the sort of base of when I'm programming a lower body workout that is targeted towards glute growth specifically. Obviously, like, Then you have things such as leg extension, all that sort of stuff for quads, all of that. Then when it comes to supersets, ideally you want to train the muscle in the shortened and lengthened position as one. So for example, doing leg press and RDLs, that's a really classic one that I enjoy. So yeah, that is another tip there when programming supersets as well, but focusing on the main compound lifts to start with and then going on to those later on. Another thing I'd also say is super important when it comes to programming and all of that stuff is really prioritizing form over ego lifting. Really focusing on the mind-muscle connection, slowing down that time under tension and getting the form spot on before you go heavy on weights, because number one, avoids injury, and number two, you're going to recruit your glutes more if you're actually focusing on form, really slowing down, really controlling that movement, rather than doing something with poor form, not even using the muscles in the way that they're meant to be used. Depth on the squats, you want depth on those hip thrusts. You really want to focus on that form and getting that range of motion there. Another thing when it comes to programming, which I found really helped with my mind-muscle connection, is glute activation warm-up sets. So glute activation, there are a bunch of not very good, I was about to swear there, not very good glute activation available on the internet. Ones that I found very effective, however, were glute bridge, holds, step ups, but making sure that they're really slow, really controlled, high box step ups, so where your leg is coming like above that 45-degree angle, just really slowing down that movement as well, and doing that sort of like 3 sets before going into my actual lower body workout. And then when I would go into my workout on my compound lifts, so for example my deadlifts, my squats, warming up to those. So with my squats I'd do a set at the weight of the bar, and then I would maybe do a set at sort of 60% of my working set weight, like 40 kg, progressively overloading each week. Now that can be by weights, by reps, by time under tension, what I was saying about slowing down that movement, slow it down even more. Another thing I'd like to address with glute growth is, are your glutes not growing because you are overtraining them? And this also ties into cardio. If you overtrain your glutes and you're sort of training DOMs on top of DOMs, delayed onset muscle soreness, so like when your muscles are super sore, that isn't going to grow your glutes. One thing I used to really underestimate was recovery and rest. The beauty of rest is you should never feel guilty for resting, because my God, that is when your butt is gonna grow. That is basically like the time when your muscles are recovering. What happens when you work out is your muscles have been torn slightly, and the repairing period is happening where the muscle is going to build, repair, and grow in that time. So that is when resting becomes more important than ever. Don't do some HIIT workout. Don't do anything which is gonna basically put strain on your legs. Go for a light walk, do a little yoga flow on your rest day, but make sure you aren't training your legs too much. To see my results, I was originally doing 2 leg days a week. Now I'm much more advanced. Later on in the line, I've been weight training for a year and a half, like really consistently, building up my leg strength. My leg strength is quite high. So now I can do 3 leg days. However, with 3 leg days, I do drop the intensity slightly because it's 3 rather than 2. So rather than 2 big, heavy leg sessions, it'll be 3 sort of moderate leg sessions. Make sure you're not overtraining. And as I say, if you're sort of beginner, intermediate, 2 times a week, training legs is plenty. Also, another thing I did was I did absolutely no cardio. Now, I am not saying anything against cardio. I think cardio is fantastic. It just means if you want to do cardio, you will need to eat more. I had an unhealthy relationship with cardio, so I was trying to move away from that. So cutting out cardio for me really worked. What I'm trying to say is cardio will not get you glutes. I would just say when you're doing cardio, alongside wanting to build your glutes, just be super wary that you will likely have to eat a bit more. Another thing which is so important is eat your food, guys. You need to be in a slight surplus. If you want to grow, you got to be in a slight surplus. A calorie surplus is your friend, and food is your friend. And also focusing on protein. Now, protein doesn't even have to be like crazy high. Around like 2 grams per kg body weight. 2 grams, 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kg body weight. It does not need to be at 200 grams. When you reach beyond that point, like, extra protein is pretty much pointless and isn't going to do much, and you'll benefit so much more from carbs and fats. Got up to around 3,600 calories every single day to grow. However, everyone is so different, so what I often say is working out a calorie surplus is your maintenance calories. So what I do often get my girls to do is track as they would for the sort of 5 days, like eating as they would normally, putting it in. That's around what they're eating, around their maintenance, and then going up about 10% from there to start in a surplus. If you don't want to track, I would just say eat, but you have to eat beyond fullness. So adding in an extra, consciously adding in extra snacks, consciously upping those portion sizes. But food is your friend if you want to build a bump. You are eating a surplus. My tip here would be like cutting back on fiber. And I actually found when I started getting super full, opting for more processed foods like wraps instead of like grains and stuff like that helped me a hell of a lot, because it meant I was just less full the whole time and less bloated and all of that kind of stuff. So going for the more calorie dense foods, I also did eat like less vegetables and stuff, but I was also eating stuff like donuts and stuff. Like, you have to realize that all of this food is good. Like, all of any food you can think of, like, it will all contribute to building your glutes. You can do all of this stuff that I'm telling you to do, but if you're not eating enough, you're not going to see the results that you want to see. One other thing is you have to remind yourself that this is a very slow process. I mean, it took me kind of a year, to be honest. You're not going to see results just like that. But one thing that is really helpful is taking progress photos on a weekly basis to see the growth, and then you can actually compare like 3 months down the line. 3 months down the line you might be like, oh my god, nothing's happened, but then when you compare it to your starting photo, you're like, oh my god, I actually have grown my glutes quite a bit. And also doing measurements as well. Yes, I do mean putting a measuring tape around your bum. Trust me, I didn't weigh myself the whole time, because yeah, the way you're going to see glute growth is through keeping a track of the measurements of it. So seeing that, and if they start to plateau, eat more, is my simple answer to that. But yeah, remind yourself it's a slow process. Don't get annoyed at yourself. Just keep going, keep trusting the process. And another thing as well is you also will experience quite a bit of body recomp, like down the line. Like a lot of my weight came on to my stomach and then it redistributed to my bum because I just kept weight training. And it's a really weird thing because you don't realize it's happening, but like my butt has grown, even though I'm bulking now, but like before my bulk, intuitively eating around maintenance, my butt grew and my waist went down, and that's purely because my weight was just redistributing and I was training my glutes and resting my glutes and fueling myself properly. So I think that takes us to the end of this video. I guess we've addressed all your training, resting, eating properly, not overdoing it on cardio and overtraining and all of that stuff. I will love you and leave you. Any questions, you can find me over on my Instagram, live_living_life__. I will also link my Instagram profile here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be interested to see if you guys like these sort of more training video kind of things, and any other recommendations you want or what you want to see more of, just drop it down in the comments below. But yeah, love you all lots. I will catch you later and go eat your food.